And I want to welcome you to another episode of Beyond the Surface Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer. This morning, I'm seated at my desk to discuss the possibility of Congress members having to take drops. That's right. There was an article that was posted on Facebook, and the title of the article was Americans Want Congress Members to Pee in Cups to Prove They're Not on Drugs. And I couldn't help but reflect on this. I recently did a podcast talking about some of the asinine laws or bills that are being proposed in hopes of forming laws around them. And one of the laws was a law that asks that Tennesseans be required to take marijuana drops to be tested for marijuana in order to continue to receive food stamps, to receive their link cards. And so what's most interesting about that decision is the congressman that suggested it, who really pushed for it the hardest, was a congressman named Trey Radel, Radel. Okay, he's not only a Republican, he also is a member of the Tea Party. And he was really instrumental in pushing for welfare recipients to be forced to pee in a cup. And this is all in the effort that he wanted to make sure that they were worthy of food stamps. So this same gentleman, congressman, being supported by taxpayers' money, ends up a couple of weeks later getting caught with cocaine. And, he was caught, so there was no debate about it. And what was interesting was his argument, which he said, he was struggling with alcoholism. And so that's sort of how he segued into cocaine use. And so he asked for the American public to pray for him, to actually, the nation to pray for him and his family for what he described as basically, making bad decisions. Okay, so my response to that is, okay, here you have a guy that is pushing for the everyday citizen who has less access, less education, less resources, a far less income. You have to fall into a particular income bracket to even qualify for food stamps. And ideally, most people who qualify for food stamps are women. So I grew up in Detroit, and as a child in Detroit, the welfare system was called Aid for Dependent Children. So we know that for the most part, food stamps are used to keep food in the household in order to feed children. Okay, so here's a guy that doesn't care about the general state of a family. So, let's say that I'm in a family and my mother smokes weed. All right, what does that have to do with the other 3 kids being able to eat? Not that I'm saying that you should be able to be a drug addict and, just run rampant through resources and not use them and waste them on the street. But there's no proof that because you smoke weed that you're any less or any better of a care provider for your children. And here's a guy that is privileged and has the honor to represent his constituents, who is a learned man. This is an intelligent man. This is a thoughtful man who is doing cocaine at the expense of the taxpayers and has the audacity to ask for us to pray for him because he's struggling with addiction, something that's a common problem in America. So the other piece to my thought about this is because I struggle not to be angry, but I'm actually angry, is that I'm for Congress members peeing in the cup. Yeah, I'm for it. I feel like what's good for the goose is most certainly good for the gander. America has a drug problem, has had a drug problem for quite some time. And that drug problem is not a minority problem. I still remember being a kid and Studio 54 was so popular in New York, and all the entertainers and dancers and artists fell into Studio 54. Well, as much as, free love was going on, a lot of what Studio 54 was about was drugs. It was about, folks being able to get up in there and do their cocaine and feel free and loose and get jazzy and get funky with it. And, everybody knew that's what was going on in there. So, even for quite some time, this country has had a drug problem. Now, until Reagan initiated the war on drugs, until there was a war on drugs, in which case it became a war on the poor, And then it shifted to just a war on black people where, you had a community that was just saturated with drugs, just dumped with crack cocaine. Then it became just like this ugly, ugly behavior that required the stripping of everything from housing to education opportunities to being able to find work and now even being able to feed yourself. So I've long said, I really believe America, I'm talking about the government, has to a certain degree become the biggest drug dealer of them all. And one of the ways I see that manifest itself is through these commercials. Like sometimes I'm just watching commercials, and I'm not a big TV watcher. But I watch commercials and I look at just the constant pumping of various drugs. And this goes on all day. You get everything from, and I'm going to throw out some names. It'll probably strike with you. Celebrax, Lipitor, Cialis, Viagra, Lyrica, Chantix. And so what's interesting is here you have a government that's talking about asking welfare recipients to basically prove their worthiness to get food stamps, which means that you make about $20,000 to $14,000 a year for a family. Okay, this would mean there's more than 2 or 3 of you all in a family, and they allow all day long direct to consumer advertising of drugs from pharmaceutical companies, and they are literally direct to consumer, meaning that you sit and you looking at the commercial and you learn more about the drug via the commercial. And this is an advertisement. This is not actually a doctor saying that even though you have some of these symptoms, this is even safe for you. This is literally advertising companies, pharmaceutical companies being given television space. And the industry last year spent $2.4 million, or actually $2.4 billion on just television ads. And this is according to the Nielsen. So that means that it's 23%, it's actually a 23% drop from $3.1 billion spent in 2007. These people are these people are spending money. And they're making money. They're actually making money. The industry is a strong industry. As quickly as it goes down, it picks up because they're constantly adding new drugs to the list. So you're not going to be dropped for Cialis, Viagra. You're not going to be asked to pee in a cup for Celebrax. You're not going to be asked to go and get a checkup and explain, why is Lipitor in your system, but they want to see if you have marijuana. Well, one of the things that sort of disturbed me is, and I always kind of hold my breath at the end of the commercial because I like to check out and see what exactly are the side effects of these drugs. Because apparently they want you to pee in a cup because they're worried that you're going to do something, okay? So I just went and looked at a couple of drugs. I said, you know what? I want to see the side effects of these drugs. So one of the drugs that they push real hard is a drug called Cialis. And Cialis is pushed, they're really worried about these men in sexual dysfunction. I mean, every other commercial deals with these men and some sort of erectile dysfunction. So Cialis is for erectile dysfunction. It's to help you relax muscles and increase blood flow to that body part. Okay, what's interesting is not that part of it. What's most interesting is, in order to, be this, top of the line lover, one of the things that you make yourself at risk for, and they tell you, you need to call if you have heart rhythm problems, if you have coronary artery disease, if you have kidney or liver disease, if you have bleeding disorder or hemophilia, if you have stomach ulcers, any sort of physical deformity of the penis. These are all possible conditions that doesn't match up or can be set on that can happen to you, that can worsen just by messing with this drug. You can't mess with it if you've had a stroke or congestive heart failure. You cannot mess with this drug if you got high or low blood pressure. That's a lot going on there. There's an absolute lot going on just with Cialis. So it says Cialis can decrease blood flow to the optic nerve of the eye. This means all of a sudden you cannot see. And this has occurred, and it says it's occurred in a small number of people, but I don't want to be one of the people that it occurs with. It says most of them that it happened with had diabetes or high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or some sort of pre-existing eye problem, and they smoked. But here's the thing: America is full of, because of our diet, because of our lack of exercise, because of our stress level, we're full of people, full of men with diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart failure. And most of these things are correctable without taking Cialis. If you just simply clean up your diet and get physical again, many of these symptoms will go away. Okay, and then I wanted to look at, there was another drug that is a highly kind of push drug, Chantix. So Chantix is about smoking. Okay, so this is hailed as support to help you begin to stop smoking. It's supposed to assist you with that. So I wanted to see what were the side effects of Chantix. So the side effects of Chantix are pretty basic. Mood or behavior changes, confusion, anxiety, panic attacks, hallucinations, extreme fear. You may feel impulsive or agitated, aggressive, restless, hostile, depressed. You can become hyperactive mentally or physically, and or have thoughts about suicide or hurting yourself. That's my favorite one. Hurting yourself. Okay? And they asking that your family be alert to these changes. They also you have to worry about shortness of breath, sudden numbness, chest pains, and then they have some common side effects, which is nausea. And it says it may persist for several months with vomiting and diarrhea. A common side effect is constipation and gas, sleep problems, dizziness, muscle and joint problems, sweat or urinating more than usual, flu symptoms, swelling, and my absolute favorite of it, weight gain. This is all in order to assist you from stopping smoking. Smoking is horrible. It's addictive. And they've pumped up those drugs too to make it worse. So we do all this stuff at a major risk. But these commercials for this product run all day long, and nobody's talking about giving you a drop for that. Then you have Celebrax. Okay, Celebrax. Some of the side effects of Celebrax is chest pain, weakness, shortness of breath, slurred speech, black, bloody, Tory stools, coughing up blood, vomit look like coffee grounds. That sounds fun. Swelling or rapid weight gain. And I'm going to wrap up with one more. This one is supposedly to help you with cholesterol. This is to help you with your triglycerides. Lipitor. Here you run the risk of muscle weakness, fever, constipation, diarrhea, gas. So you're trying to get your cholesterol down, which will ward you off from a heart attack or stroke. But in order to get that, you have to be weak. Prepare for fever, constipation, diarrhea, and gas. I mean, these are all possibilities that have shown up. And these are what the pharmaceutical companies are telling you. And they get to push this stuff all day long. And they put together snazzy, real, jazzy commercials. And, they try to make it seem like all this stuff is easy. And, talk to your doctor. And so I'm not understanding. On one hand, the government is saying if you're doing drugs, you're terrible, it's wrong. And it's so wrong, we don't even want you to get food stamps. We don't want to feed you. We don't want to feed your family. We don't want to help you. And this is just dropped for marijuana, which carries none of these side effects. Okay. But on the other hand, it's saying, hey, you know what? We got some good drugs going on out here. You got a problem, we got a drug. You got a problem, you got a drug. Okay? Oh, you're fat? Got a drug for that. Your heart rate up? Got a drug for that. Your sex is poor? Got a drug for that. You don't feel like yourself? You're depressed? We got a drug for that. Which one is it, America? Are we pro-drugs, anti-drugs, or somewhere in the middle? Or are we only for drugs when we're supporting pharmaceutical companies and giving them television space to manipulate us and use us to get sick? Because the reality is, when you use drugs, when you're using these drugs, it fixes one problem and often causes another. It often causes another. So yes, we don't want taxpayer money going to support families that are misusing resources that are set aside to help them sustain life. But we also don't want taxpayers' money going to people to demonize those very people who are in need, and who really live a very marginalized existence. These are not people that have a lot of power. Oftentimes, these are not people that even advocate for themselves. We don't want those people that's supposed to be representing them doing drugs either and demonizing them at the same time. The old saying is, wouldn't that be the pot calling the kettle black? And finally, we don't want a country that is supposedly having a war on drugs that's promoting nothing but drugs all day long. We need to have a real discussion about what's okay and what's not okay in this country. We need to have a real discussion about what does it mean to be against drugs and for drugs. We need to have a real discussion about homeopathic methods, getting back to the basics, the Daniel diet, coming back to eating living food, the benefits of living food and the effects of living food. We need to have a discussion about drugs that have medicinal properties, foods that have medicinal properties, and stop demonizing people for simply anesthetizing because they have poor coping skills and they're living in terrible circumstances. I don't do drugs, I don't like drugs, I don't promote drugs, but I also don't demonize individuals that use them. I think people have to be dealt with and communities and groups have to be dealt with on an individual basis, and we have to always know the mindset behind why people do what they do. This was a bit of an FYI and a rant, but it is full of important information, and I do want you to think about it. Again, you've been listening to Beyond the Surface Radio. And I'm your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer. And until we meet again, be safe in God's grace.